All right, today we're diving into a really fascinating personality profile from the world of homeopathy. It's called Natrum Muriaticum, and really it's a deep look into what happens when emotional wounds make someone build walls around themselves, leading to a life of quiet suffering.
So let me start by asking you this. What happens when a really deep hurt, a huge disappointment, doesn't just fade away? What if it becomes the very lens through which you see the world? That's the core idea we're going to unpack here.
So what is this stuff Natrum Muriaticum? Well, in homeopathic literature, it's what they call a psychotic remedy, which is a term for a certain pattern of chronic conditions. And get this, it comes from plain old mineral salt, sodium chloride. But in this context, it's used to describe a whole archetype, a very specific profile that connects a person's emotional state with their physical symptoms.
To really get this profile, you have to start at the very beginning, at its heart. And that's the core wound that shapes everything else, a deep, profound fear of betrayal.
You know, what's really striking about this is how specific the fear is. We're not talking about a general anxiety. It's this deep-seated belief that the one person you trust the most, that's the person who's going to hurt you. It's not really about romance. It's about this fundamental need for trust that feels like it's doomed to be broken.
And you can imagine, right? Living with that constant fear just creates this massive insecurity. It leads to this feeling of being completely and utterly alone because why would you ever depend on someone if you believe it's just setting you up for pain? So how do you live with a fear that deep? Well, you build a fortress. You put up an emotional wall. And what the source material describes is this fortress of grief.
This isn't some loud, dramatic kind of suffering. The source calls it silent grief. This is someone who cries, but only when they're alone. They start to pull away from people, preferring to be by themselves. And here's the kicker. They just can't let go of the past. They dwell on every old hurt, replaying it over and over, which leads to this state the text describes as resentful.
The end result of all this emotional armor is that they come off as reserved, maybe even cold and unapproachable. But it's all a defense mechanism, right? If you don't let anyone get close, they can't hurt you again. So that isolation, it's a survival tactic, born straight from that core wound. Okay, but this is where this profile gets incredibly complex. Because that fortress they build, it creates this massive internal conflict. It's a total study in contradiction.
And this just lays it all out perfectly. I mean, look, on the one hand, they're pushing everyone away. They don't want company, they're not eager to talk. But on the other hand, there's this profound, hidden need for connection. The source talks about a one-sided, silent love, and even this pattern of falling for people who are unavailable, like married men. And maybe that's because it feels safer. It's a way to feel love without the risk of being let down.
Wow, this detail from the source is just so powerful. It points to this very specific delusion that when they look at their own reflection, they see someone wretched. This goes way beyond low self-esteem. It's a truly distorted self-image that just reflects how broken they feel on the inside.
Now, according to this homeopathic framework, that intense emotional state doesn't just stay in the mind. Nope, it starts to echo throughout the body. So let's take a look at the physical signs that are described.
It's really interesting how the texts link this emotional profile to such specific physical symptoms. Notice the connection to salt, the very thing the remedy is made from, a craving for it, plus increased thirst. Then there are these other unique signs, like a crack right in the middle of the lower lip, headaches that get worse in the sun, and even a particular kind of thinness around the neck.
So what we're really seeing here is a whole picture. The central idea in the source is that you can't separate the mind from the body. These physical markers are seen as the body's way of expressing that deep, silent grief that's been held onto for so long.
And that kind of brings us to the big final thought here. This profile describes a personality that is essentially a fortress, carefully built piece by piece to protect a very deep wound. It's a powerful survival strategy, for sure, but it's also a painful one. And it leaves us with this question. If your entire identity is the wall you've built, how do you ever find the courage to let it down and heal what's on the inside?